"You're unbelievable, Lena. You just had to mess everything up." Emily's voice cut through the sound of waves crashing in the distance. Her fork clattered onto her plate, and she crossed her arms dramatically, her glare fixed firmly on me. I sat there, frozen, as the other voices at the table went silent. The tension hung thick in the air, wrapping itself around the room like a suffocating blanket. My dad sighed heavily. My mom's lips tightened into that thin line she always made when she was trying not to take sides but clearly had already picked one. I stared down at my plate, the shrimp scampi suddenly tasteless, my appetite completely erased by the familiar weight of their judgment. "My name is Lena Harper. I'm 35 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one to blame. Family drama? My fault. Dinner running late? My fault. The weather turning bad on a picnic day? Well, if you asked my mom, she might find a way to pin that on me too. And the worst part? My sister Emily always seems to come out of these situations smelling like roses. Emily's always been the star. She's funny, charismatic, and great at making herself look like the victim when things don't go her way. My mom calls it charming. I call it exhausting. But it's the kind of exhausting you learn to live with when you've spent decades as the scapegoat in your own family. I should have seen this coming, the moment where Emily would pin another disaster on me, but somehow, I always hope for better. This particular disaster started 2 days ago when we arrived at the beach resort. It was supposed to be a relaxing family vacation, time for me, Emily, and our parents to unwind together for a change. I'd even taken the lead on booking everything, the resort, the dinner reservations, and activities. I spent hours researching, comparing reviews, and triple-checking the confirmations to make sure everything was perfect. But when we showed up for our first dinner reservation at the resort's exclusive seafood restaurant, we were told there was no record of our booking. My mom immediately turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "Ina, I thought you said you handled this." "I did," I stammered, pulling up the confirmation email on my phone. "Look, it's right here. I made the reservation weeks ago. Then why are we standing here with nowhere to sit?" Emily chimed in, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Great job, Lena." The hostess was apologetic, but firm. The reservation had somehow been canceled, and the restaurant was fully booked for the night. We ended up eating burgers at a nearby casual diner, a far cry from the elegant seafood dinner we'd planned. Emily made sure everyone knew just how upset she was. She kept sighing dramatically, shooting pointed looks in my direction, and muttering under her breath about how this was exactly why she hated letting other people handle things. The next morning wasn't much better. Emily had planned a snorkeling excursion for all of us, her one contribution to the trip. When we arrived at the meeting point, the guide informed us that the boat had been delayed due to mechanical issues. It wasn't anyone's fault, but that didn't stop Emily from glancing my way and muttering, "Another flawless Lena plan." I wanted to scream. The snorkeling trip wasn't even my responsibility, but years of practice kept me silent. It wasn't worth starting a fight, I told myself. Better to let her vent and move on. But as the day went on, Emily's jabs became sharper, and my parents, true to form, did nothing to stop her. My mom even laughed at one of Emily's comments, saying, "You two need to work on your teamwork." Teamwork. As if this was some shared failure. I bit my tongue, feeling the familiar sting of tears threatening to form but refusing to let them fall. And now, here we were, sitting at a fancy restaurant on our second night, and Emily had decided to officially blame me for ruining the vacation. She leaned forward, her voice rising in pitch as she recounted every single mishap, twisting the narrative to make me look incompetent and careless. "First, we miss our dinner reservation because Lena can't manage to click the confirm button," she said, counting on her fingers for effect. "Then, the snorkeling trip's a disaster because, what, did you forget to check the weather or something?" "That's enough, Emily," I said quietly, my voice shaking. I could feel my dad's eyes on me, but he didn't speak up. My mom looked at me like she was waiting for me to apologize. Emily smirked, clearly enjoying the show. "Oh, come on," Emily continued, her tone syrupy sweet. "Don't get defensive. I'm just pointing out the facts. Someone has to." My fingers tightened around the edge of the tablecloth. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger bubbling up like a volcano I'd tried so hard to keep dormant. I'd spent my entire life letting things like this slide, convincing myself it wasn't worth the fight. But this time felt different. This time, I felt something snap. Emily's accusations hung in the air long after dinner ended. My dad leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples like the entire situation was a headache he couldn't wait to escape. My mom busied herself with the check, avoiding eye contact with me as if by doing so she wouldn't have to pick a side. I don't understand why this has to be so complicated, my mom finally said, her voice heavy with exasperation. Lena, you know how important these trips are for our family. Why didn't you double-check everything? I did, I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Everyone turned to look at me, surprised. I checked everything twice. The dinner, the snorkeling, all of it. I don't know how things went wrong, but it wasn't because I didn't try. Emily let out a dramatic sigh. Well, clearly it wasn't enough. She pushed her chair back and stood up. I'm going for a walk. Maybe someone else can figure out how to salvage what's left of this trip. She left without another word, leaving the rest of us sitting in awkward silence. My dad glanced at my mom, who shook her head as if to say, just drop it. That night, I lay awake in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling. The words Emily had thrown at me replayed in my mind like a broken record. You just had to mess everything up. This is why we can't rely on you. It wasn't just her words that stung. It was the way my parents had let them hang there, unchallenged. My mom's thinly veiled criticism, my dad's passive silence. It was like they'd already decided I was guilty, even without proof. And why wouldn't they? This wasn't the first time Emily had turned the family against me, and it probably wouldn't be the last. I thought about calling my best friend, Lisa. She'd been my sounding board for years, always quick to remind me that I wasn't as alone or as unimportant as my family sometimes made me feel. But it was late, and I didn't want to bother her. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my messages. As I stared at the screen, something caught my eye, a text thread from Emily dated 2 weeks ago. Hey Lena, can you check the snorkeling thing for me? I'm slammed with work and might have messed something up. Actually, I think I accidentally canceled the dinner reservation too. Can you fix it? My heart stopped. I scrolled further, rereading every message she'd sent. The more I read, the clearer it became. Emily had been the one to screw up the plans. She'd admitted it outright, then conveniently forgotten to mention it when she started blaming me. Under so much stress, I had forgotten about those messages. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. Breakfast was a blur of strained small talk, my mom trying to smooth things over with cheerful comments about the weather, while Emily scrolled on her phone, ignoring everyone. I kept glancing at my dad, hoping he'd say something, anything, to acknowledge what had happened the night before, but he stayed quiet, sipping his coffee like nothing was wrong. I excused myself as soon as I could, heading down to the beach to clear my head. I texted Lisa, asking if she had time for a quick call. She called back almost immediately. What's up? She asked, her voice warm and familiar. You okay? Not really, I admitted, my voice breaking slightly. Emily's at it again. She blamed me for ruining the vacation, and my parents, they just went along with it, like always. Oh, for crying out loud, Lisa groaned. What happened this time? I told her everything, the dinner reservation, the snorkeling, the way Emily had twisted the story to make it seem like I was the problem. By the time I finished, I felt like I'd run a marathon. And you're just letting her get away with it? Lisa asked, her voice sharp. Lena, you can't keep doing this. You have to stand up for yourself. What's the point? I said bitterly. Even if I say something, they'll just take her side. They always do. Not if you have proof, Lisa said. Do you? I hesitated, the screenshot thread flashing in my mind. Actually, I might. I told Lisa about the messages, reading them aloud to her as I scrolled. She listened silently, and when I finished, she let out a low whistle. Lena, that's a smoking gun, she said. You have to show them. I don't know, I said, chewing my bottom lip. It feels petty. Like, what if it just makes things worse? Worse than what? Letting Emily walk all over you while your parents do nothing? Come on, Lena, you've spent your whole life taking the blame for things that weren't your fault. Don't you think it's time to change that? Her words hit me hard. Deep down, I knew she was right, but the thought of confronting Emily, and by extension my parents, made my stomach churn. What if they refused to believe me? What if it just reinforced their idea that I was the troublemaker? Look, Lisa said gently, sensing my hesitation. I know it's scary, but you deserve better than this. You deserve to have your side of the story heard. The rest of the day passed in a haze. My mom suggested a trip to the boardwalk, and my dad seemed eager to avoid any serious conversations, so I tagged along, pretending to enjoy myself while my mind raced. The screenshots burned a hole in my pocket, their presence both comforting and terrifying. By the time dinner rolled around, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't keep letting Emily rewrite the narrative. If she wanted to paint me as the villain, fine, but she'd have to do it in the face of the truth. The restaurant was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the ocean bathed in golden light. A soft melody played in the background, mingling with the clink of glasses and the hum of conversation. But at our table, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat quietly, pushing a piece of salmon around my plate as my mom filled the silence with cheerful comments about how lovely the resort was. My dad nodded occasionally, his focus more on his wine glass than the conversation. Emily, as usual, was the center of attention, recounting some story about work that had both my parents chuckling. It was as if the chaos of the past 2 days had been completely forgotten, or maybe conveniently ignored. And then, just as dessert arrived, Emily turned to me with a smirk. "So, Lena, what's your plan for ruining tomorrow's itinerary? Or are we just winging it now?" My fork clattered onto my plate, the sound loud enough to draw a few glances from nearby tables. I felt my face flush, the anger bubbling up so quickly that I couldn't stop it. "That's enough, Emily," I said, my voice low but firm. She laughed, tilting her head as if she were amused. "Oh, come on, don't get so defensive. I'm just joking." "No, you're not," I shot back, my hands trembling slightly as I pushed my plate aside. "You've been blaming me for everything that's gone wrong this week, and I'm done pretending it's okay." The table went silent. My mom's eyes widened, her hand halfway to her glass of water. My dad cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Emily leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with a smug expression. "Here we go," she said, rolling her eyes. "Lena's playing the victim again." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I'm not playing the victim, I'm just telling the truth. And since you seem to have trouble with that, let me help you out." I pulled my phone from my bag, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might drown out the sound of my own voice. I opened the text thread and placed the phone on the table, the screen facing up. "Do you recognize these, Emily?" I asked, my voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "You sent me these 2 weeks ago, remember?" Her smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, reaching for the phone. "What are you talking about?" My mom leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "What is this?" "It's the truth," I said, my voice steady now. Emily canceled the dinner reservation. She admitted it right here. I tapped the screen, scrolling up to highlight the messages. And the snorkeling trip? That wasn't my fault either. She asked me to fix her mistake, and when I couldn't, she decided to pin it on me instead. My dad's eyes narrowed as he reached for the phone, his face darkening as he read the messages. "Emily," he said slowly, "is this true?" Emily's face turned red, and for a moment she looked genuinely panicked. But then, like clockwork, she put on the wide-eyed, innocent look she always used to get out of trouble. "Dad, come on," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You know how easy it is to misinterpret texts. I wasn't blaming Lena, I was just venting. It was all a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been blaming me all week, calling me incompetent, making me feel like everything that's gone wrong is my fault. And now you're saying it's a misunderstanding?" "Girls," my mom said, holding up her hands, "let's not turn this into a fight." "It's not a fight," I said, glaring at Emily. "It's the truth. For once, I'm not letting her rewrite the story to make herself look good." Emily's smile wavered as she looked at my dad, her voice softening. "I didn't mean to make things worse, I was stressed, okay? And I might have said things I shouldn't have, but that doesn't mean I don't care about this trip or our family." My dad set the phone down, his expression unreadable. He looked at me, then at Emily, and finally at my mom. "Beth," he said quietly, "I think we've been blind to how much we've been letting this happen." My mom's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean," my dad continued, "Lena's been taking the blame for things she didn't do for years. We've let it slide because it was easier than dealing with the truth." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint clatter of dishes as a waiter cleared the table next to us. My mom opened her mouth to respond, but hesitated, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Lena," she said finally, her voice soft, "why didn't you say anything sooner?" I let out a bitter laugh. Would it have made a difference? Every time I've tried to defend myself, you've brushed it off or sided with Emily. Why would this time be any different? The weight of my words hung in the air, and for the first time in my life, I saw something crack in my mom's expression. Regret, maybe even guilt. She reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on mine. "I'm sorry," she said, and though the words felt small compared to the years of frustration I'd carried, they meant more than I expected. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting between our parents and me. "Look, I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice quieter now. "I guess I messed up, okay? I'm sorry, Lena." I stared at her, unsure whether her apology was genuine or just another way to deflect attention. But for once, I didn't care. I wasn't seeking her approval. I'd already found what I needed, the truth laid bare for everyone to see. The walk back to our hotel was unusually quiet. The sound of the waves crashing in the distance filled the silence as my family seemed lost in their own thoughts. My dad walked beside me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, while my mom and Emily trailed a few steps behind, their hushed conversation barely audible. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, but that relief was mixed with exhaustion. Speaking up had drained me in ways I hadn't anticipated, and though I felt vindicated, part of me wondered what this would mean for us moving forward. Would anything really change, or was this just another temporary moment of clarity destined to fade like all the others? Back at the hotel, my dad motioned for me to join him on the balcony. The view was stunning, the moonlight casting a silver sheen over the ocean, but my mind was too cluttered to appreciate it. "Lena," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I owe you an apology." I turned to look at him, surprised. My dad wasn't the type to admit when he was wrong, not because he didn't care, but because he preferred to keep the peace by letting things blow over. Hearing those words felt like uncharted territory. "For what it's worth," he continued, "I think you were right at dinner. We've been unfair to you. I didn't see it at the time, but I see it now, and I'm sorry." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Thanks, Dad," I said quietly. "That means a lot." He rested a hand on my shoulder, giving it a small squeeze. "You've always been the steady one in this family, you know. We've leaned on you more than we should have. I can't promise we'll get it right overnight, but I'll try." Later that evening, my mom came to my room, her expression hesitant. She lingered in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. "I wanted to talk to you," she said, sitting down on the edge of the bed, about tonight. I stayed silent, letting her gather her thoughts. She looked down at her hands, twisting a gold bracelet around her wrist. "Your dad's right," she said finally. "We haven't been fair to you. And I think, deep down, I knew that. But it was easier to look the other way, especially when Emily made such a fuss about things." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "She's good at that." My mom smiled faintly but didn't disagree. I want you to know that I see you, Lena. I see how much you've done for this family, how much you've sacrificed, and I'm sorry if it ever seemed like we didn't appreciate you." Her words, though overdue, brought a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. I nodded, my voice steady despite the emotions bubbling beneath the surface. "Thanks, Mom." Emily didn't say much the next morning. She was unusually quiet at breakfast, keeping her eyes on her plate and her comments to herself. But as we were packing up to leave, she approached me in the hallway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Hey," she said, her voice subdued. "About last night. I know I screwed up and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have blamed you for everything." I studied her face, looking for the cracks in her usual armor. For once, she didn't seem defensive or smug, just tired, maybe even a little ashamed. "It's not just about last night," I said carefully. "It's about a pattern, Emily. This keeps happening and I'm not going to let it anymore." She nodded slowly, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I get it. I'll try to do better." It wasn't the sweeping apology I'd dreamed of, but it was a start, and for now, that was enough. The weeks after the vacation felt different. Subtle, but different. Emily sent me a few texts, small updates about her day or a funny meme, like she was testing the waters. My parents called more often, too, asking about my work and genuinely listening when I talked about my projects. It wasn't a complete transformation, old habits don't disappear overnight, but it felt like the start of something better, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the one holding everything together. They were meeting me halfway, and that was enough. But the biggest change wasn't in them. It was in me. Speaking up during that dinner had been terrifying, but it had also been freeing. I realized how much power I'd been giving them by staying silent, by letting myself carry the blame just to keep the peace. That night, I made a decision I wasn't going to do it anymore. At work, the change was even more noticeable. I started saying no to tasks that weren't mine to take on, pushing back when my ideas were overlooked in meetings, and celebrating my wins instead of downplaying them. It was small things, really. Correcting a colleague when they misattributed my work or taking credit for a project I led, but those small things added up. My boss noticed, my team noticed, and eventually I noticed too. Lisa, of course, was my biggest cheerleader. Over lunch one day, she raised her glass of iced tea dramatically. "To the new Lena," she said, grinning. "A badass who doesn't take anyone's crap." I laughed, clinking my glass with hers. "I don't know about badass, but I'm getting there." "No, you're already there," she said firmly, "and it looks good on you. As for my family, things were still a work in progress. Emily and I weren't suddenly best friends, but we talked more often, and our conversations felt less fraught. My mom still had her moments, like when she asked me to help plan another family event, but this time I set clear boundaries. "I'm happy to help," I told her, "but I'm not taking the lead on this. Let Emily handle it." She paused for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough," she said. And just like that, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The girl who had once bitten her tongue and let others dictate her story felt like a stranger now. I wasn't that person anymore. I was someone who spoke up, someone who set boundaries, someone who knew her worth. And the best part? I didn't need anyone else to validate that worth. Not Emily, not my parents, not anyone. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Not because everything had changed, but because I was the one who had changed. Hey there! Did you like the story? If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot and makes sure you won't miss out on more great stories we share here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.